Good morning. We're back with Marx. And today, incidentally, I'll try to get your grades to you today. The grades on the paper. Today what we want to get into is law. The kind of laws, well, of course, everything according to Marx is economically determined. In other words, forget will, as in Rousseau or Hegel, right? The will of the state, because remember, the state is simply an abstraction anyway. Okay, so as he says on page 223, since the state is the form in which the individuals of a ruling class assert their common interests, and in which the whole civil society of an epoch is epitomized. Well, remember there are different economies, right? Agricultural, industrial, service, right? And of course, information. Okay, so you're going to get different laws relative to those different kinds of societies, right? Now, remember, it's what it is predominantly, because there's a bit of industry going on in the agriculture. You got to produce harrows and balers and stuff like that. But it's primarily agricultural or primarily industrial, because the agricultural is still going on, right? And there's service involved in servicing equipment in an agricultural economy, or servicing the individuals who work in industry. Okay, and even in the information economy, there's still services, there's still a bit of industry, but it's what is predominant, right, at a particular time. So it follows that the state acts as an intermediary for all community institutions. And that these institutions receive a political form, and also, therefore, a legal form. Hence the illusion that law is based on will, volonté générale, according to Rousseau, divorced from its real basis on free will. Similarly, law is in its turn reduced to actual laws. In other words, the actual laws which pertain to a particular society. Well, for example, in an agricultural society, property lines are going to loom rather large. Well, indeed, the whole development of geometry. Remember geometry? 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 When did geometry very likely began in Egypt, because each year the Nile overflowed. And each spring, therefore, all the property lines were destroyed, and so you had to redraw the property lines. How did you do that? Well, you did what you did. Ge means earth, and metri means measure, right? So you measure the earth, geometry. So property law, especially property, landed property, becomes extremely important laws for an agricultural economy. There are also special laws for industry, right? For example, well, a good example of industrial child labor laws. Did you have to worry about child labor on the farm? Definitely not. The children worked on the farm. They collected the eggs or sometimes slopped the pigs. But the child labor laws were not an issue in agriculture. In fact, the family farm, everyone in the family participated in the operation. Whereas child labor laws became much more to the fore with the abuses of industrial capitalism. Okay, so laws are socially conditioned. Okay, but what does socially mean? For Marx, socially means economically conditioned. Well, I mean, for example, when you get to an information economy, right, you're going to need different sorts of laws. Laws against identity theft, right, for example. T-H-E-F, I'll get it. Laws against identity theft. Well, you didn't have a problem with identity theft in previous economic ages because you didn't have computers. So as soon as you had computers, you're going to need laws which will take care of that. Moving right along. Over on page 225, the bottom of that top paragraph there, this implies at the same time an avowal that positive law, in other words, positive law is law that is enacted, posited in the society, can and must change its affirmation in accordance with the needs of social, that is economic development. Whenever Marx uses the word social, what he means is economic. Okay, I think that's enough on that. Oh yeah, however, there are also connected with law is the issue of punishment. More specifically, capital punishment, okay? Marx takes up the issue. Okay, the page 228, top of the page there. It would be very difficult, if not altogether impossible, to establish any principle upon which the justice or expediency of capital punishment could be founded in a society glorying in its civilization, right? So in other words, Marx is not in favor of capital punishment, right? And it's becoming less and less. There are societies in which it still predominates, right? And there are societies in which it has been virtually outlawed. Most of Europe, for example. So punishment in general has been defended as a means of either ameliorating or intimidating. Okay, there are two. There's the utilitarian, U-T-I-L-I-T-A-R-I-A-N. Utilitarian, the utilitarian basis for the greatest good for the greatest number, utilitarian ethical theory. And basically what it is deterrence, right? In other words, you had a nice public hanging and people saw the public hanging and therefore they would not even consider killing someone, okay? However, Marx argues that it has never really deterred anyone ever since the time of Cain, who killed his brother Abel. It doesn't seem to have deterred anyone. There's another principle to justify capital punishment, and that was the one established by Hegel. Remember the negation and the negation of the negation, right? Hegel says punishment is the right of the criminal, right? In other words, the criminal has a right to his. It may seem a little strange. It would be something like someone going to the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, pounding on the table and demanding that he be permitted to pay his back taxes. It is an act of his own will. The violation of right has been proclaimed by the criminal as his own right. He has a right to be punished because, well, he's done something bad, and he feels that he should be punished for what he did, in the same way that his father punished him for when he misbehaved as a child. Right? It's a rather paternalistic view of penal theory. So the violation of the right has been, okay, his crime is the negation of the right, and punishment is the negation of the negation, right? In other words, Marx knows Hegel's theory. And consequently, an affirmation of right solicited and forced upon the criminal by himself, right? In other words, the criminal expects to be punished for the crime that he committed, right? That's Hegel. However, in the same way that he rejects the utilitarian argument, so also does he reject the argument of Hegel. Moving right down the page there. This is the theory considering punishment as the result of the criminal's own will is only a metaphysical expression for the old jus talionis, right? Jus talionis. The biblical notion of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, right? In other words, this is what is called the retributionist theory of punishment. So, jus talionis, eye for eye, tooth against tooth, blood against blood, right? Plainly speaking, and dispensing from all paraphrases, punishment is nothing but a means of society to defend itself against the infraction of its vital conditions, whatever may be its character. Okay, so as far as, there are three justifications for capital punishment. There's the utilitarian one, it deters future crime. Hegel's, which the criminal demands the right to be punished for something that he did wrong, and there's the retributionist theory. Of course, what does Marx say? Well, over on page 230, here he said, "Is there not a necessity for deeply reflecting upon an alteration of the system that breeds these crimes," right? If there's a great deal of crime going on, where is the crime taking place? You say, well, so Marx would say, well, don't get rid of the criminal, get rid of the conditions, right? Well, what are the conditions producing it? We'll call it the slums, right? Okay? So get rid of the conditions which cause the crime. Not a necessity for deeply reflecting on an alteration of the system that breeds these crimes. Whatever the system is that breeds the crime, take care of the system, instead of glorifying the hangman who executes a lot of criminals to make room only for a supply of new ones. Right? Marx has a point. Page 243. He makes the same point over there. About two-thirds of the way down the page. If man is formed by his circumstances, these circumstances must be humanly formed. Right? Rather than punishing individuals for their crimes, we should destroy the social conditions that engender crime. We should destroy the social and give to each individual the scope which he needs in society in order to develop his life. In other words, instead of spending a whole bunch of money on prisons, Marx would say, spend it on education. Okay. Okay, where did we leave off? That kind of takes care of capital punishment. Yeah. Excuse me, I lost my place here. Yeah. Okay. On page 227, right down to the bottom of the page, what we're getting into now is revolution, right? The dynamics of revolution. Well, of course, we know what the ingredients. Remember the ingredients. Ingredients. The ingredients of a good revolution. Okay, first of all, you need an oppressed class. And then you need an enemy, or what should we? Yeah, the enemy. And of course, you need the intellectuals to raise the consciousness of the oppressed class to realize that they don't have to live this way and that life could be different and better. And of course, then you need manners of the barricades. They could also be women. There's a famous painting by, I think it's the French painter Delacroix, of the French Revolution, and there's this rather busty looking French woman leading the charge. Okay. So in other words, revolution is an equal opportunity employer. And it is an employer, right? As he says back there on page 227, force is the midwife of every old society pregnant with a new one. It is itself an economic power, right? In other words, revolution, what he's saying there, revolution is a product, right? Something the society produced. It is itself an economic power. And indeed, it's exportable, right? Undoubtedly, you've heard of Che Guevara. He was a Cuban revolutionary, participated in the revolution in Cuba, and of course, he went on to, he moved on to foment other revolutions in different parts of, especially South America, and I think he was killed in, I think it was Peru or something like that, one of the South American countries where he was trying to export the Cuban Revolution. Okay, let's take a look at over the dynamics of revolution. He says, the proletariat, okay, that's proletariat. The proletariat and wealth, the enemy, are antinomies. Well, you know what an antinomy, antimonies. Antimonies. Okay, anti means nomoi, I'll get it. Antinomies. Okay, nomoi are laws, right? Or laws, customs. Anti means they're opposed, right? So the antinomies means they are opposed to each other, right? I remember there was a street in Buenos Aires, Argentina, right in front of the presidential palace, which is the Casa Rosada, pink. The pink house rather than the White House. The pink house, and right in front of it was the Congreso, Avenida de Congreso. Congress was nearby, across the street. Anyway, and you had on the Casa Rosada side of the street, you had street lights. On the other side of the Congreso, right, and someone remarked that los pobres no tienen la luz. The poor don't got lights. Okay, there was separated by 2 streets. Well, of course, we do the same thing, and there's the other side of the tracks. Right. So wealth and proletariat and wealth are antinomies. As such, they form a whole. They are 2 forms of the world of private property. Well, they both relate to private property in the sense that the people with wealth have the property and the proletariat doesn't. Okay, moving right along. Over on page 232. Okay, here we go. Page 232, about the 5th line from the bottom of that top paragraph. If the proletariat triumphs, this does not mean that it becomes the absolute form of society, for it is only victorious by abolishing itself as well as its opposite. Right? In other words, proletariat not only has to overcome the enemy, it also has to get rid of its own lousy situation, right? Thus the proletariat disappears along with the opposite, which conditions it, private property, right? In other words, remember what's the source of alienation? Ultimately, the source of alienation is private property. So, if you get rid of private property, you get rid of alienation. Very simple. So the problem is to discover the place which each of them occupies in the antinomy, right? In other words, you got to figure out how it works. The 3rd paragraph, the possessing class and the proletarian class express the same human alienation. Well, I mean, after all, does the capitalist actually participate in the production of whatever industry or factory or concern that he owns? Does he actually understand what and how it is being produced? Not necessarily. He hires managers, superintendents, overseers, whatever, right? So, I mean, he's as much alienated from the whole business as the proletariat, as the workers are, right? So the possessing class and the proletariat express the same human alienation. But the former, the possessing class, is satisfied with its situation, right? Feels itself well established in it. Recognizes this self-alienation as its own power, and thus has the appearance of a human existence, right? In other words, Marx is not going to claim that the capitalist really has a human existence, right? Okay. And one of the reasons is the capitalist doesn't work, right? Down at the bottom of the page on 232, he said, "It is not in vain that it passes through the rough but stimulating school of labor," the hard knocks of life, right? Labor, of course, produces discipline, right? You have to be disciplined in order to be able to labor, do your work well. Whereas the capitalist doesn't have the stimulating school of labor, right? Remember the master and the slave back in Hegel? Well, the master kept getting, the slave did all the work, and the master simply enjoyed the fruits of the slave's labor, and of course the master got fat and flabby, right? And because he really didn't work. And similarly, as far as Marx would be concerned, there's, what is it? We call them the fat cats. Okay. Over on page 235, we'll just finish, I think we'll finish here, but let's take a look at 235. About the third of the way down, the fourth paragraph there. Thus, man was not liberated from religion, he received religious liberty. He was not liberated from property, he received the liberty to own and acquire property. Oh yeah, he's got rights. He was not liberated from the egoism of business, he received the liberty to engage in business. Well, when you say, well, he has the right to go into business, well, yes, he has the right, but does he really have the right to do so? I mean, after all, you'd say, well, there's equal opportunity. However, in order for there to be equal opportunity, the ordinary citizen needs, well, he can't do it without capital. Where does he get the capital? He borrows it. He goes to the bank. And of course the bank manager says, of course I'd be willing to lend you $50,000 to start your new little business. But he said, by the way, what kind of collateral do you have? Right? Well, he doesn't own anything, or he may rent. Right? So, does he really have equal opportunity? Yeah, yes. He can form a corporation, right? Anyone in the state of Washington can form her own corporation and establish it as a business and pay $1 a year to the Secretary of State of the state of Washington and renew it every year in order to keep the corporation current. However, if the person cannot get money to fund his enterprise, it may not happen. Okay. Anyway, I think, just one more point here. Over on page 237, the middle of the page. The social life from which the worker is shut out, social means it's got an economic meaning to it, is a social life very different in kind and extent from that of the political sphere. This social life from which his own labor excludes him is life itself, physical and cultural life, human morality, human activity, human enjoyment, real human existence. Well, he really doesn't have it, right? Okay, I think, why don't we stop there, and we'll pick up the dynamics of revolution the next time, and that will lead into the future society, right? Okay, we'll see you on, what's today? Today's Wednesday. We'll see you on Friday.